You have 3 days to pack up and leave. Emma's words cut through the Sunday dinner conversation like a blade. Across the table, my sister wore that familiar smirk while our parents sat in uncomfortable silence. I remained perfectly still, then calmly reached into my purse and withdrew the legal documents I'd been carrying for months. Setting them beside my untouched plate, I looked directly at all three of them. Actually, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. You have 24 hours. The sound of silverware hitting plates filled the room. Emma's confident expression crumbled. What should have been a peaceful family meal, herb-crusted chicken, creamy potatoes, candlelight flickering on the walls, had become the battlefield I'd been preparing for. They had no idea that while they whispered their plans behind closed doors, I had been documenting everything. While they plotted my removal, I had been quietly constructing the legal fortress that would protect what was rightfully mine. This dinner marked more than the end of a meal. It was the start of my reckoning. 3 years earlier, this house had been mere days from bank seizure. Dad's retirement savings had vanished in a fraudulent investment scheme, and Mom's mounting medical expenses had created a tower of debt that reached toward the ceiling. Meanwhile, Emma was living her best life in Colorado, building her yoga instructor brand and posting exotic vacation photos while I scraped together money for basic utilities. I never revealed how close we came to losing everything. I simply took action. I restructured the mortgage in my name alone, secured a business loan using my freelance graphic design income, and began working 16-hour days from the converted guest bedroom. Spreadsheets and overdue notices became my constant companions. As I fought to save our family home, no one questioned how the foreclosure notices suddenly stopped arriving. They simply credited divine intervention. I allowed them their comfortable illusion because my motivation wasn't recognition, it was preservation. This house contained every meaningful memory I possessed. The botanical wallpaper Mom selected in 1998, the deck's burn mark from Dad's 4th of July fireworks experiment, even the squeaky third stair that always betrayed my midnight kitchen raids. This place represented home in the deepest sense, not just structure and foundation, but history and heart. I'll never forget the day the property deed was officially transferred to me. Mom and Dad signed the papers with trembling hands. At the attorney's office, "Are you absolutely certain about this?" the lawyer asked repeatedly. Dad nodded grimly. "It's our only path to survival." Outwardly, I maintained my composure, but internally I felt the crushing burden of inheritance without celebration. This was responsibility disguised as privilege, duty rather than gift. That same evening, Emma called for the first time in months, not to check on the family crisis, but to gush about her new vehicle and her boyfriend's sapphire engagement ring. I said nothing about the house, the debt, or the fact that I'd survived on instant noodles for 3 consecutive days. She wouldn't have cared, or worse, she would have twisted the information into ammunition for future attacks. Growing up, Emma had been the family's shining star, head cheerleader, class valedictorian, Daddy's precious princess. I was the quiet observer who rarely demanded attention. Because I never insisted on recognition, they gradually forgot to offer it. But I remembered every slight, each forgotten birthday, every ignored emergency call, every time Mom said, "She's just overwhelmed, sweetie. Don't take it personally." I wasn't jealous, I was exhausted. When Emma swept back into our lives 2 weeks ago with her perfectly styled hair, monogrammed luggage, and that condescending smile, I sensed trouble approaching. What caught me off guard was how quickly everyone fell back into their old patterns of worshipping her. Emma entered as if she'd never left, dropping her designer bag carelessly on the hardwood and air-kissing Mom like they were meeting for brunch at an upscale cafe. Dad's entire demeanor transformed when he saw her. "Pumpkin," he breathed, his face lighting up with joy I hadn't seen in years. I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway, dish towel clutched in my hands, watching this performance unfold. She didn't acknowledge my presence, not even a glance or nod. Later, I discovered she'd been texting them for weeks, requesting temporary accommodation while she figured things out. Her engagement had ended, either he cheated or she did, depending on which version she told. She claimed to be rebuilding her life, so naturally she returned to the one place she'd never lifted a finger to maintain. During dinner that first night, she dominated every conversation, laughed too loudly at her own stories, and consumed wine like water. Mom hung on her every word while Dad nodded like a devoted audience member. When I presented dessert, homemade lemon tart, their favorite, Emma scoffed dismissively, Still playing house, are we, Evie? It was a small barb, but it struck deep. Emma never delivered outright cruelty. She was too sophisticated for that. Instead, she wielded subtler weapons. Backhanded compliments, single-syllable dismissals, and seemingly casual comparisons that cut to the bone. And it worked. Within days, Mom and Dad reverted to their old dynamics. Emma claimed the master bedroom while I remained in the guest room. That had served as my office during the months I'd lived like a tenant in my own home. Emma just needs space to heal, Mom explained softly one morning. Don't create unnecessary tension, Dad added without looking up from his coffee. Tension? Apparently, my mere existence was disruptive. Paying bills was tension. Maintaining boundaries was tension. But Emma floating around in silk robes while ignoring household responsibilities was perfectly acceptable. I maintained my silence until I overheard their porch conversation one evening. She's always been so inflexible, Emma was saying. She's exhausted, Mom replied. And you know how Evelyn clings to things. Maybe it's time for her to mature and move forward. Perhaps she should find her own place. They were unaware I was standing just inside the screen door. I said nothing then, but in that moment, I understood this wasn't temporary. Emma hadn't come home to heal. She'd come to reclaim. And Mom and Dad were prepared to let her. The erosion didn't happen overnight. It's gradual, quiet, almost gentle until you suddenly realize the foundation has crumbled beneath your feet. First came the small things. Mom stopped offering me morning coffee. Dad left my mail unopened on the hallway table. Emma rearranged my kitchen organization system, laughing about how chaotic it had been before. No one asked my opinion. Then came the conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. The meaningful glances between them. I began feeling like an unwelcome guest who had overstayed their welcome. One evening, I walked into the living room to find them together on the couch, wine glasses in hand, fire crackling. Emma was discussing an online real estate course she'd taken. I think it would be wise to downsize eventually, she said casually. Maybe even sell this house while it's still in good condition. Get a condo somewhere quieter. This place is just too much for Evelyn to handle alone. I stood there invisible while they discussed my future without me. They didn't notice when I quietly left and closed my bedroom door. I didn't cry or scream. I sat at my desk and opened the folder labeled property documents, deed, title transfer, mortgage refinance, tax records, legal counsel notes. My name, my responsibility, my home. But apparently, none of that mattered because in their eyes, Emma remained the center of their universe. No matter how long she'd been absent, no matter how little she'd contributed, she didn't need to earn their loyalty. She'd inherited it. Meanwhile, I had to purchase mine month after month, dollar by dollar. And even then, it came with conditions. As long as I remained useful, quiet, and didn't challenge the family myth that Emma was the sun and I was merely a shadow, I started locking my bedroom door, not from fear, but from foresight. Something was coming. I could sense it in Emma's avoidance of eye contact, in Mom's sighs whenever I mentioned bills, in Dad's lowered voice when he asked, "Do you really need to be here full time?" Nobody said it directly, but I heard the message clearly. You're in the way. You're too much. You're not wanted. So I waited, not passively. I sharpened my silence, gathered my evidence, and let them underestimate me. I allowed them to believe I was soft, frightened, or too loyal to fight back because I knew the attack was imminent. I just didn't expect it to come over roast chicken and red wine. It was meant to be just another family dinner. Roasted chicken with garlic, creamy mashed potatoes, Mom's signature lemon vinaigrette salad, the kind of meal she prepared when she wanted everything to feel normal. The table was set for 4. Emma brought expensive wine she'd picked up after yoga class. Dad carved the chicken ceremoniously, and I sat silently, watching them pretend this house wasn't built on the foundation of my sacrifice. Halfway through the meal, Emma took a sip of wine, set down her glass with dramatic flair, and smiled at me like a predator who'd already caught her prey. You have 3 days to leave the house, she announced casually, as if discussing the weather. Just like that. 3 days. No discussion, no context. A verdict delivered alongside mashed potatoes and silence. I looked at her, then at Mom and Dad, hoping for some reaction, some defense. Nothing. Mom studied her plate. Dad reached for the salt. Neither spoke. Excuse me, I said quietly, Fighting to keep my voice steady, Emma tilted her head with saccharine sweetness. It's nothing personal, Evie. We just think it's time you moved on. You've been here too long. It's not healthy. I repeated. Mom and Dad agree, she said smoothly, glancing at them like a prosecutor revealing her witnesses. Dad cleared his throat awkwardly. It's not about the house, he mumbled. It's about peace, harmony. Peace, I whispered. You think this is peace? Emma leaned forward conspiratorially. I just don't want us to keep walking on eggshells. Your energy is heavy. I almost laughed. Heavy. The person who hadn't paid a single bill, who'd waltzed back in and acted like displaced royalty, was now discussing energy. I set down my fork slowly, hands trembling, not from fear, but from crystal clear understanding. I reached into my bag and retrieved the thick folder I'd carried for months but never touched. Opening it, I flipped to the first page and slid it across the table toward Emma. The deed bearing my name, signed, notarized, and filed 2 years ago. Looking directly at all 3 of them, I said calmly, actually, you all have 24 hours. The silence that followed felt like thunder. For a moment, nobody moved. Emma stared at the deed as if it were written in a foreign language. Mom's eyes darted between the document and me, wide with disbelief and fear. Dad set down his fork carefully, as if trying to prevent the table from shaking. I don't understand, Emma said, her voice brittle. This isn't real. It's very real, I replied steadily. Signed, notarized, and legally binding. Dated 18 months ago, the day I paid off the final mortgage balance in full. Dad's face went pale as I slid another document across the table. I refinanced it in my name, paid off the liens, took over the insurance, handled the property. Taxes, fixed the leaking roof, updated the electrical system, and eliminated the basement mold. You remember that, right? No, probably not. You weren't here. Emma stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor, her expression no longer smug but cold. So this is what this is about: control. No, I said, this is about respect, something none of you seem to think I deserve. You're evicting your own family, Mom finally whispered. I'm reclaiming what I built, I replied, turning to her. What I held together when everyone else disappeared. What I sacrificed my 20s for. You let her walk in and declare me a squatter in my own home. You said nothing. We didn't know, Dad mumbled weakly. You didn't want to know, I snapped. It was easier to pretend this place stayed afloat by magic, that I was just a quiet presence in the background. Well, surprise, I'm the reason we still have a roof at all, Emma laughed bitterly. God, Evelyn. No wonder no one wants to live with you. You're impossible. You act like some martyr, like the family owes you a parade. I never asked for a parade, I said, rising to my feet. But I also didn't ask to be betrayed over dinner like some stranger who overstayed their welcome. I reached into the folder and pulled out the final document, a printed letter from my attorney, stamped and signed. This is a formal eviction notice. You have 24 hours. After that, law enforcement gets involved. The locksmith comes tomorrow afternoon. You wouldn't dare, Emma spat. I turned to her. You dared first. Dad stood up, hands trembling. There has to be another way, Evelyn. Please. There was, I said, my voice cracking despite my efforts. It was when I asked you both to sign the deed and you said yes. When you told me you were proud of how I stepped up. When I spent 2 years cleaning up your mess without ever making you feel ashamed. That was your other way. You chose this one instead. Mom looked like she might cry. Evie, she whispered, you're not this kind of person. I stared at her. No, I wasn't. But you made me this way. You let her humiliate me at this table and said nothing. You watched me drown in responsibility and called me tense. Now you want to act surprised when I finally say enough. Emma moved toward me. I'm not leaving, she declared. I don't care what papers you wave around. This is our family's home. I grew up here too. I stepped back, gripping the table's edge. Yes, we both did. But I'm the only one who stayed when it mattered. You don't get to walk back in and rewrite history just because you're louder. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. Pack your things, all of you, by noon tomorrow, or I'll have officers escort you out. Silence consumed the room. Then slowly, Emma turned and stormed upstairs, her heels clicking like gunshots on the wooden floor. Dad collapsed into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Mom stared at me, and for the first time, I think she truly saw me, but I didn't wait for understanding. I left the table, walked to my room, and closed the door with shaking hands. Outside, the house creaked. Inside, my heart pounded. I had just declared war on the only people I had left. But for once, I wasn't afraid. The next morning, the house felt different. Not quieter, it had always been quiet in that suffocating, polite way, but hollow, like something had cracked in the foundation and let all the warmth escape overnight. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed listening to the creaks of floorboards, occasional drawer closings, and hushed voices down the hall. They were packing at 8:13 a.m. I heard the front door open and Emma's voice cutting through the air like broken glass. Just bring the truck around. I don't need help. I just need you to be fast. I didn't move. Didn't go out to gloat or offer assistance. I just sat on the bed's edge, hands clenched in my lap, waiting for the next sound. Footsteps on the stairs. A thud. A suitcase dragged across hardwood. Then silence again. At 10:07 a.m. I opened my door for coffee. The hallway was empty, but the air felt charged like after a lightning strike. I passed Dad in the living room, sitting in his old recliner, staring at the blank television screen, holding the remote without pressing anything. He didn't look up or speak, just let me walk by like I was a ghost. Mom was in the kitchen, packing plates into a box marked fragile. She paused when she saw me. Your father doesn't know where we'll go yet, she said softly, avoiding my eyes. Emma offered her apartment for a while. It'll be cramped. I didn't respond, just nodded once and reached for the kettle. She didn't mean to. Mom began. She did, I interrupted. And you let her? Mom's shoulders sagged. She didn't argue or cry, just picked up the next plate and wrapped it in newspaper. By 11:40 a.m., the front door opened and closed 3 times in quiet succession. Once for Emma, once for Mom, once for Dad. No goodbyes, no final words, only the sound of departure and wind against the windows. At 12:03 p.m., I locked the door and turned the bolt slowly, feeling it click into place. It was done. No screaming, no physical confrontation, just a fracture, deep and clean, the kind that doesn't bleed externally but never fully heals. I walked through the house room by room. Their possessions were gone, but their presence lingered. Dad's cologne still hung in the hallway. Mom's gardening gloves remained on the windowsill. Emma's perfume still haunted the guest room she'd claimed like a throne. I didn't touch anything. Yet, I just stood in the center of the living room, the space we'd once called family, and let the silence settle like dust. For the first time in years, the house was truly mine. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like aftermath. The first morning without them was eerily quiet. No footsteps, no clinking mugs, no whispered conversations behind doors. Just the refrigerator's hum, occasional old wood creaking, and the steady rhythm of my own breathing. I made coffee and sat by the window. For once, no one had claimed the best seat. The house felt foreign and familiar simultaneously, like wearing a dress I hadn't tried on in years. I started small. I cleared out the master bedroom Emma had claimed as if it were owed to her. I opened the windows wide, let the stale air out, repainted the walls soft gray, removed Mom's floral curtains that she'd insisted on keeping for tradition, and hung a single photograph. Me standing on a Montana mountain trail, arms outstretched, alone, and smiling. Then I moved to the hallway. I took down the old family portraits, not to erase the past, but to stop it from looming over my present. I boxed them carefully and labeled the container memories, not altars. Next was the garden. I pulled out Mom's dying rose bushes, the ones she never tended but insisted we keep because they were Dad's favorite. I planted lavender and rosemary instead, things that didn't just survive but thrived with space and sunlight. Every task became a ritual, not of grief, but of reclamation. I fixed the creaky stair Emma always complained about, replaced the attic light bulb, and converted the guest room, once my workspace, then her private suite, into a proper office with a standing desk and golden hour sunlight pouring through the windows. Slowly, the house began to breathe with me. It stopped feeling haunted, stopped echoing with what-ifs, and started feeling like a place built for now, not for the ghosts of people who'd left. I worked, I slept, I cooked meals just for myself. I played music loud. I danced barefoot in the hallway. I laughed, real, full-bodied laughter, when I spilled coffee on a rug and didn't have to apologize for it. For the first time, I wasn't waiting to be seen, wasn't adjusting myself to be easier, quieter, more convenient. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. Because everything around me, the walls, the shelves, the chipped tile I hadn't replaced yet, wasn't just mine on paper. It was mine in presence, in effort, in intention, and that was enough. A plain white envelope tucked between bills and coupons. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting instantly. Loopy, careful cursive, the same one Mom used when labeling our school folders or writing birthday cards with smiley faces in the corners. I stood by the mailbox for a long time, just holding it. Part of me didn't want to open it, not from fear, but from disinterest, like revisiting a book I'd already closed. But I did. The letter was to Pages. Neat, no crossed out words, no apology. She said she forgave me, as if I were the one who'd betrayed them. As if defending my home, my boundaries, my worth was something shameful that needed absolution. She wrote that she hoped one day I'd come to my senses, that Emma was trying her best, and that they were managing in the city apartment, even if it was tight and less than ideal. She ended with, "We still love you, Evelyn, even if we don't understand you anymore." I read it once, then folded it slowly, precisely, and dropped it into the bin beside the recycling. Not from anger, not as a dramatic gesture, but because I didn't need it. I didn't need love wrapped in conditions. Didn't need to be understood by people who'd never bothered trying. For so long, I'd begged for crumbs, validation, kindness, acknowledgement. Now I was full. The silence that followed their absence wasn't lonely anymore. It was clarity. The house didn't echo like it used to. It held me, not perfectly, not gently, but honestly. I poured tea, sat by the window, and watched the afternoon light spill across the new lavender plants. And I smiled, because some stories don't need closure. They just need a door and the strength to close it.